I'm very, very excited about meeting with you this morning. It's going to be such fun for me to share this video with you that I think you haven't seen. And I worked and worked to get it down to 10 minutes, but I couldn't do it. It's 11 minutes. But I thought for that extra minute, you would give me grace. This video is a video of an incident that has sort of haunted me for years. It was a workshop conference that Jean and I were doing, and we had this sort of little fight in the workshop, and it was the recording was gone, what was not available, and then just recently, Charlotte's husband finished working with it and gave us this video, and this is a clip of it and a clip of this little fight that Jean and I had, which you might think, well, why is that so exciting? You know, I'm sure lots of you have who knew Jean have had fights with him. You know, why should this be news? It clarified, I think, the difference between Jean's relationality and my integration of Jean and the relational psychoanalytic perspective. And and I couldn't quite remember this as I was trying to piece it together before I got the video, and then to see the video and to be able to share that moment with you that was these years ago. And as we watch the video, I'm hoping that you will it will both clarify what Jean and I are sort of dancing around, which is this very intricate, subtle difference. But if you really get it, as I hope we will, then it's not so subtle. It's a big difference. And it isn't just the content. So when you watch it, I want you to watch it in two ways. One way of the content, what we're saying, but the other way, and in these videos, we've said over and over, it's not the content alone, right, that we're listening to. We're listening to the deeper than the content. So the other way I want you to watch it is how it evolves in our relationship, mine and Jean, what we're actually doing. You know, Jean's concept, I often quote it, of that it isn't the saying, but the doing in the saying. It's not what you're talking about, but it's what you're doing. So if people are having a political discussion and they're screaming at each other, don't be ridiculous and blah, 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 what they're saying may be very different than what they're actually doing, which is trying to win the argument or something, right? So what Jean and I are saying is one thing, but then there's this special moment where Jean says, well, how are Lynn and I relating? And then it's sort of like the scene changes in a way. So I want you to be aware of what happens then and what we're doing there in our relationality. So I want to sort of set this up for you. And the way that I would do that is to say that if we need to have my kind of relationality and Jean's kind. My kind is not just mine, Lynn Preston's relationality, but it's the integration that that has come in me after all of these years of relational psychoanalysis and focusing. And Jean's is all his philosophy and Carl Rogers and Jean Genlin, right? So we need both of these things. Without my kind of relationality, if you remember that little clip, and we're going to see another part of that tiny clip today also, where Jean says he hates groups, and he says, the only kind of group that is worthwhile is when you ask the person, can you say more? Those 4 words. And then when we looked at that last time, we sort of smiled at the idea of you as facilitators asking each person, can you say more in anything that they said? That wouldn't be a group, would it? And many focusing groups are that way, where each person focuses and the group helps that person. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a wonderful structure. But it's not really a group process in the way that I'm thinking of developing the us. So if if we only had Jean's way of relationality, we would not have that sense of the groupness and the development of the us. If we only had the relational self-psychology part, we wouldn't have that exquisite sensitivity to the world that the individual is. The spot, when you touch that spot, it goes way down and way out and way deep. And we're all in that. And the precision and complexity of opening that up is so powerful. That understanding of implicit intricacy and of also of that conviction that what the person is saying, that's the content, is a channel or a doorway into this much larger becoming that the person is moving into. And we're listening to the becoming. We're not just listening to what is said. Do you all know that in your bones? I think you do, but just, yeah, raise your hand. You know that in your bones. If it really saves us in so many ways to know that it isn't the content, it's what the person is trying to get at. And that when we can listen, it opens up. Okay, so what I would wish for is that we could find these 2 places of what I'm pointing at and what Jean is pointing at, and that you could have a vision of how these go together and how you might use these these two, I'll call them two spots, because Jean uses the term spot, the spot. So as I was editing this video for you, I was having a new appreciation for Jean's way of relationality. And I was feeling so grateful all these years to have what I got from him, which is this sense of a kind of umbilical cord to the spot in the person. It's this connection that I can feel in my body. And I can feel when I'm straying away from listening, the inner point that the person is making. And not that I shouldn't stray away from it, but I always know how far I've gone, and I always know the way back, or that we can't lose that. And then I felt also very grateful for this this umbilical cord to the sense of the us. And I know that that's been difficult for me to teach, what is the felt sense of the us? And then Jane didn't said, well, I don't know if there's a felt sense of the us, right? But I was thinking this morning, as I was getting ready for you, that the very simple way to put it is that you're tuned in to the room. You're tuned in to what's going on. It's very simple. Just like focusing is very simple. You're tuned into the gut level, or you're tuned into the inside, or it doesn't have to, you could be very simple. But when you walk into a room and you don't know what's been said, but you can feel the temperature, you could feel what's been going on in that room, and you feel it in your body. It's like, wow, do I want to be here? Or it could be, wow, or it could be, or it could be many, many things. But they're palpable things that don't just have to do with what's being said, but all of the mood, the atmosphere, and those are other words for felt sense. So I would love you to develop both of these connections, the umbilical cord to the spot in the individual, and then the umbilical cord to the sense of the us.
Where I'm leading to now is that this intrapsychic, so-called, mistakenly called intrapsychic process, is always inherently relational also. I'm present, then I have to be acutely aware of the relational process that is happening. I cannot, and this is a pitfall here of our community, I cannot think of myself as being this pure neutral vapor that is only helping this person find their focusing place inside them. I have to recognize that I just told them what to do. And that goes over very well with many people, and with many people it doesn't. I once had a client who said outright to me, I don't like it when you tell me what to do inside myself. So I said, oh, I see, you don't want me to tell you what to do in your own inner territory. Well, I won't do that anymore. Then she looked up and said, but don't go away. so then I had this more complicated message to say, but it encapsulates what I'm trying to say. You see what a gross missing, it's like missing the elephant in the room, not to recognize that when I say to somebody something, there is an interaction going on, not just what I'm saying.
I just want to add a little thing in there.
Oh, you get to do it.
My 2 cents. When the client said, I don't want you to tell me what to do inside myself, but don't go away, for a relational therapist, that's a wonderful moment. I mean, it would be a moment.
Well, say a little more.
Well, it would be a moment in which I would say, oh, yes, if you tell me that, maybe I'll go away, and what would that do?
So now let's set this up, because we're doing very well here now. I didn't know how we'd get in the middle, and we're in the middle.
Oh,
I want to, with all the strength I have, agree with Lynn. And then when that's done, then I want to disagree with Lynn.
I like the first part better.
And then when that's done, I want to agree with Lynn again.
Oh, I like that again.
So before we have lunch, we have to do a lot of work. Lynn just said two things that are interactional. She said, first you said the thing that I completely agree with comes first, then the two things. The first thing she said was, when I ask myself, what am I doing now? What is the interaction now? Or what is happening now? What is this person doing to me, and what I'm doing to her by saying what I just said, or what could I do more? When you ask that question, Lynn is saying you have to pay it, you are already asking both the outside interaction and your own inside, because your own inside is living in this interaction. So you don't really know that you're expressing an angry criticism until you look inside and say, oh, gee, I'm pissed, I didn't know that. Then you realize, oh my God, what I said has that in it. If you just look at the outside only, you won't find it. But if you look at the inside only, you won't find it either, because you won't have what's going on. So both the inside and the outside make the so-called inside, right? You got that point by now? Then Lynn said two things you can do about that. One of them is that you can affirm the interaction. I want to say back to Lynn, and that's a distortion of Lynn. I want to say back to Lynn, you're expanding on her fear that you will go away. You see what I did? I made it an internal spot in the client. And of course that is an effect that you're having. But what are you doing there? What were you intending to do?
Those moments are very important. So of course, we all pay attention to our particular
You're stretching
things.
the moment.
So I'm stretching the moment, but I'm also paying very close attention to if she tells me something, then there's an anticipation of abandonment. So I'm just making notice of that, trying to make room for that, that is something for me, not an aside. Another thing is that I'm
So wait,
wanting...
so here's a funny difference between us that I haven't noticed before. Lynn and I have been talking for years, and so there isn't going to be some sort of simple end to it. But most of the span that we agree with is very valuable, and this conference is about that. Maybe about many others, but it's about that. So I want to say there's something funny that you did there. I'm saying my natural tendency, even if I stretch it out and say, oh, you don't want me to tell you what to do in there, but you don't want me to go away, you're afraid I'll go away, is already trying to help her locate the spot in her where steps can come. The spot in her where she right now is speaking from, living from, breathing from. The spot in there which the thing about you're afraid I'll go away is only a handle for that spot. But I do agree that there are many times when we want to stretch out. By stretch out, I just mean what you said back was, oh, you don't want me to tell you what to do in there, but you're afraid I'll go away. Oh, you're afraid I'll go away. Oh, and she's stretching out the moment so that, and I like that. I want to do that too, quite often. Not always, but quite often.
For me, it's not the spot in there of the patient. It's the spot between us or with us
the in there is also between us. And so when the patient says, I don't want you to go away, I don't want you to tell me what to do, and I don't want you to go away, it's not only something for the client, it's also something very important for the team, for the us, of oh, there's very important information here about what we have to develop together, how we can be together, how I contribute and respond here is about us and the spot for us. So there's a spot, there's a spot in the patient, which isn't in the patient, and there's a spot in me, which isn't in me. And then there's also the spot of the us, the team, and the edge of where we are together, that I call the new us. The us is always first, and the us doesn't include just two people. The us isn't two outside people. It's this whole big thing.
Yeah. And it's happening right now, here, so you can find it. Right? Like, how am I relating to Lynn right now, and how am I relating to you right now? Can be found. It's here, you know.
And what is the edge of the us right now? How do we, Jean and I, and all of us, what is the forward edge of our team right now to open, to find the new?
I'm not so sure as you are that the us has a forward edge.
Oh. No, don't say that. Of course.
No. When you really understand a philosopher or a theorist or another person, then you always understand more. So there's nothing wrong with you knowing more than me once you figure out all the things that I have to say. You have gone in this direction further, and that's why we're doing this.
Yeah.
So your own no shout was not losing me, but what was your own no shout? I misinterpreted it.
Oh, my oh no is don't say that we don't have a further movement as an us here. I know you don't mean that.
Well, what I
misinterpreted you.
We're going to move further as an us. But whether you can take the kind of further that an organism has and attribute it to an us, I'm not so sure. And I get annoyed by people who simply assume that. But if they just in this sloppy way say, oh, we all live in this interactional cosmic something or other, I feel like, well, do you really have that? Can you really feel that? So I'm not so sure that the us really lives like a third body that would have its own tissue and its own implying. I think the us has more to go in her and has more to go in me. And there I go, you see, doing that thing.
Yes. I just wanted to clarify one little point there, that when I find that spot, when the client says, you know, I'm afraid you'll go away, and for me, that's the precision of the forward implying of the us is very, very palpable and very precise. And there's something that's being said there and something that I'm feeling what is being implied for us. But I know that there's an edge there for an us when she says something so direct. And I've had the tendency of telling her what to do, and she says, don't do that, but don't go away. There's something very, very right there in the us that implies some forward movement for our team. We're going to learn how, just as Jean and I, we've only had 30 years. I mean, we're going to have time to have that right there exactly, and we do, of course, always.
Right.
Jean is amazing at seeing the miracle of a growing thing, of a plant, say. and seeing that it's becoming and feeling how it needs water and and sensing what place in it needs to be near the window um, or away from the window. And he has a suspicion, uh, and we had talked about this before, his fear of groupthink, of looking at the garden and feeling the needs of the garden. Oh, this garden needs to be weeded, or this garden needs to be watered, especially this part over here, or something like that. Um, and we need both of those, both the individual uh, and the and the larger systems that we're embedded in. Um, but it does make a very practical difference. And I'm hoping that that you can take both. The practical difference is when I say, I would pay attention to, and I would emphasize when the client said, but don't go away. That that's that 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 um that is not only instructions to me. Oh, Jean said I won't do that anymore to the client. But it's also laying out this very, very particular way that we're going to grow into the not going away and the not being bossed around or something. And the particularity of that is our challenge. So I might not even notice how I've been telling her what to do a lot. You know, I might not notice my tendency to sort of withdraw if the client doesn't want my advice or something. Um, but I will notice it when the client says that. The client may have abandonment issues, might have, the spot might be very complex for her there. But then there's this call to, oh, we have to develop this. This is where our edge is. And that's the part that Jean and I are arguing about. And he's saying, no, the us doesn't have an edge. Um, and it's very complicated for me to say, well, how much of that is Jean arguing with postmodernism? But actually, in therapy, uh, he didn't talk about the you and me. And then it's so interesting that in this dialogue, he was the one that brought up the you and me, right? He said, how am I relating to Lynn?